How would I pay off my student loans if I had to start the process all over again? When I graduated from college with over $120,000 of student loans, I thought I had just ruined my life and failed my family. I was making a youth pastor's salary and trying to dig out of this hole that I just didn't know how to escape. Now, eventually I did pay it off, but throughout the process I made a lot of mistakes that I just don't want other Christians to make in their debt payoff journeys. Now, if you want to honor God with your money and pay off your debts without regret, this is where you start. And if you guys stick around to the end, I'm actually going to give you guys a free resource that is the very thing that allowed me to pay off my student loans. The first thing that I would go back and change is to focus on the big ticket items. One of the ideas that I'm constantly hearing from content creators is this idea of the latte effect. This is basically the idea that if you spend just $5 on a latte or a coffee every single day of your life, that will eventually add up to a significant amount of money. And lots of proponents of personal finance would like to take the latte effect and convince you that if you just stop drinking your coffee every single day, you could make yourself a millionaire. The reality is, though, is that if you take $5 a day, that only adds up to about $2,000 a year, which might be significant if you're really budgeting every dollar and in a tight spot. But what really makes a bigger difference is focusing on the big ticket items that can not only save you $2,000 a year, but could even save you $2,000 a month. The three major big ticket items would be your housing, your transportation, and your food. The decisions that we make regarding where we live and what we drive and how much money we spend on food every week have a much bigger impact on our financial stability than any of those smaller decisions that we make. In fact, while everyone else in the world is telling you that buying a house is a wise and mature financial decision, I'm over here alongside most financial advisors telling you that renting might be the very thing that makes you a millionaire. That if you simply choose to rent instead of buy in our high interest market, if you invest the difference between your monthly payments there, you could literally fund your entire retirement. The really simple math behind building wealth is simply the difference between your income and your expenses. And the larger that gap is, the more capacity you have to build wealth. And as you and I are looking to make payments on our debt, the big ticket items are where we really need to draw our attention to. The second thing I'd do differently if I had to pay off my debts all over again is I would get humble and become the outlier. Pride is expensive, and we use debt to pay for it. Between the expensive cars, the nice houses, the new clothing, our culture is just so narrow-mindedly focused on presenting in such a way that gives off these vibes of social prestige. And as long as presenting in this way is our primary concern, financial stability will never be an option. It takes humility to pay off our debts. It takes humility to pack a lunch instead of going out to eat with everybody else at work. It takes humility to drive a beater instead of a brand new car. It takes humility to live with friends rather than to live on your own. And I just wasted so much time before I actually implemented this in my process of paying off student loans. But eventually I was doing this. I was driving an old beater, I was living with friends and family and packing a lunch for work every day. In fact, I remember whenever my friends and I would want to go out to eat, I would always pack a lunch and bring that lunch to Chipotle or to wherever we were eating that day. And in that season, Proverbs 13:7 was a big encouragement to me in a way that I hope it is for you today. It reads, "One pretends to be rich, yet has nothing. Another pretends to be poor, yet has great wealth." The third thing I'd do differently is I would focus on increasing my income. Now, we already said that the math behind building wealth is simply the difference between your income and your expenses. But one of the best ways to widen that gap isn't just reducing your expenses, but it's also increasing your income. Now, this really isn't easy. And certainly for some people in some seasons, it's going to be a lot more difficult than for other people in other seasons. But where you can and when you can, it will be greatly helpful for you if you can steward opportunities to increase your income. And this might look like simply just asking your boss for a raise. It could also look like taking on a side gig to create some side income. You know, in the parable of the talents, Jesus is teaching this idea of being good stewards of our resources. And I remember being in debt feeling like I don't have any resources. But one of the most valuable resources that we really don't talk about when this verse is addressed, even from the pulpit often, is the resource of time. That maybe you don't have money to spend, but where is there time in each and every one of your days where instead of being spent watching TV or playing video games, You could spend on getting another degree or getting a certification for your job in order to increase your income. Or maybe you could spend it on a side gig that would also increase your income. And this is all temporary. Maybe these side gigs aren't things that you continue through the rest of your life. It's really just for a brief period of time while you're focusing on taking care of the debts that you've accrued. And this is exactly what I did. Once I figured this out, I went back to school and got a degree that helped build my financial situation. I got a side gig and I even started selling things around the house. But every single one of these things were necessary for me to be able to pay off my loans as fast as I was able to do so. Now, if you're enjoying this content, it'd be really helpful for you to like and subscribe as I'm building my own side gig here on YouTube. Another lesson that I learned way too late in my debt payoff journey was to stay motivated. This journey of paying off debt can be a really long and exhausting season. And if we don't focus on staying motivated, we'll quit. As I'm remembering my own journey paying off student loans, one of the things that's so important as you're going through this journey is to remember the why. Remember what motivated you to begin this process in the first place. And the second thing is to celebrate milestones. In the Old Testament, the Israelites were told by God to create what were called Ebenezer stones, which were little piles of rocks that they would build up that would remind them of the important things that God has done in their life. And as you're going through this debt payoff journey, it's going to be really important for you to be able to create these moments where you remember God's faithfulness through the journey of paying off your student loans. And truthfully, the only thing that helped me focus on the why and remember the milestone experiences and stay motivated in this long and exhausting season was staying on YouTube, hearing stories of those who had paid off their debts, and being able to be surrounded by people who really focus on stewarding money in a wise and biblical way. The last thing I would change is shifting my mindset to believe that intensity isn't an option. Drastic change, like creating this lifestyle of paying off your student loans rather than just allowing them to sit there, doesn't just happen naturally. Especially in our culture in the United States, man, everything about our culture pushes us towards the materialism of using debt to have whatever we want whenever we want it. And if we really want to pay off our student loans, this isn't something that's going to happen passively. It takes intensity. That our budget isn't generalized or overarching, it's specific, and it's down to the dollar. In this video over here, I talk about how each season has its own budget, and each season has its own way of managing that budget. Meaning in some seasons, you'll be able to relax. But in this season, while you're paying off student loans, you need to be intense. And you need to know where every single dollar that comes into your account is going. Now, to help you do this, I've created this absolutely 100% free budget that looks exactly like the one that I use paying off student loans, that just helps you keep track of every single dollar as it comes in and goes out of your account. And it even comes with this graphic that's going to show you what percentage of your income is going to each area and category of your lifestyle. And I just have to say that probably the biggest secret to wealth is just starting young. That if you can figure this budgeting thing out in your 20s or 30s, it will significantly advantage you for the rest of your life. I use this exact budget to pay off my student loans and other debts, and since then have changed nothing. I've just taken the money that I used to spend on my student loans and instead taken that money and put it towards funding future expenses. But none of that is going to be possible for you unless you master your budget. And if you want to know the exact budgeting framework that I use to pay off over $120,000 of student loans on a pastor's salary, click on this video right here and I'll show you exactly how to do it step by step.